Okay, calling the meeting to order. I'm going to start with the roll call.
Ms. Bex,
I'm here.
Ms. Harrell is excused, actually. Ms. Hetland,
Present.
Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Ms. Jones is excused, Ms. Orcherton,
Present.
Ms. Salmon,
Here?
and Ms. Snyder.
Here.
Okay, next will be the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Did anybody have any questions or comments about those?
I will move approval of the minutes.
I saw just a little typo on it.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just the changes to agenda. It said Ms. Salmon stated that the meeting start with the new business. Will start? Yeah.
Okay. All right, someone want to second that?
I will.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving right along to the staff report then.
All right, everyone, this is your December staff report. And I just wanted to mention that we've had activity in all of the bolded categories of our programming this past month, and I will be elaborating on each. Firstly, I want to mention Open Scene Open Mic. Our next one is scheduled for January 9th at the Iron Post. It will be hosted by Kevin Tajay, who is the founder of the DOSE Foundation, which stands for, now ready, Dreams Orchestrated Simply by Effort. And it is a wonderful Black theater project that just began recently in the IMC. So we're really excited to have him as our next host. We're scheduling throughout the remainder of the spring. In February, ours will be a Black Herstory Slam, and it will focus on Black women poets, and it will be in conjunction with Urbana First Fridays and the Love for All Poetry Crawl. So we're really excited about that. But this one is our next, so please plan to attend. Our Art Now this December, features Ibrahim Quidrago, who's a documentary filmmaker and owner of Global Visual Media Studios, which is also was recently added to the IMC. And one of the things that we're excited about is this is one of the first documentary film production studios that the IMC has seen and our downtown has seen. So this tells the story of Ibrahim's travels to the Urbana, which he comes from Burkina Faso, and has his long history with documentary filmmaking, which dates back to participating and being featured in a music video in Burkina Faso when he was a child. So it's a really fun story to listen to if you haven't quite seen the episode yet. These air every Monday at 6:15 with reruns at 11 p.m. on Tuesdays and are online on the UPTV Channel 6 YouTube. I also always post them on our social media pages. Our current artist of the corridor is Angela Inez Balduz. Angela had an art opening for her collection of paintings that we have on display in December called I Like to Jump Like a Horse. And these are acrylic paintings and illustrations exploring family, landscape, and memory. The exhibit will be on display till the end of November. The opening reception took place on November 29th and was attended by University of Illinois Art and Design faculty, city staff, and members of the public. The artist talk will take place later this week on December 13th from 6 to 7 at the Urbana Free Library. This is a family-friendly talk, so we encourage anyone and everyone to come out and hear more from the artist. We continue our farmers market concerts with the indoor farmers market, Market in the Square, with Art in the Square. So our most recent and first concert of this series took place this past Saturday and featured the Chickadee Sermon, a four-piece folk quartet with acoustic guitar, banjo, and string bass. The band performs original music and renditions of some classics. The Art in the Square occurs every second Saturday of the month, which is the same as it does with our outdoor concerts. They begin at 10 a.m., so you know now that year-round the Urbana Public Arts program is sponsoring a 10 a.m. concert on the second Saturday of the month. Our Young Artist Studio recently had a seed collage workshop with Anna Barnes on November 18th. But our next workshop, run by Urbana Public Arts staff, will be tissue paper painting, and we'll be creating some kind of winterscape bookmarks that can be used by library patrons. That will be held on December 16th from 3 to 3:45 in the Urbana Free Library's Children's Department. We use the Lewis Auditorium. We've had a lot of movement with our sculptures in the past couple of months, and actually arguably 3 months, but the most recent of which was the installation of Races by Bobby Joe Scribner. Bobby Joe is from Woodstock, Illinois. He teaches at the American Academy of Art. Races was installed on the corner of Green and Race Streets in front of the Urbana Free Library. The installation celebration had about 30 people in attendance. We had some news from UPTV as well as WCIA. You may have heard that this had a bit of a fiasco that was unpredicted, which was that on its way down, on the original sculpture unveiling, the sculpture was damaged en route due to vibrations of the rocky roads of going down Route 47. So we ended up having to we had the full artist talk and all of the public event at that time, and thank you to the commissioners who were there. But we ended up actually installing it more recently. So he repaired it, returned it, it's stronger than ever, and it stays with us for another 2 years. And I'm excited to report that continue our conversations with the Illinois Marathon organizers who have sent a photographer to come photograph it, and we're hopeful that that will turn into a broader conversation about how it can be incorporated into the Illinois Marathon. And Bobby Joe said this is the first time Races has been on Race Street, so that's really exciting. We also said goodbye to The Horse and the Hound. So if you're familiar with The Horse and the Hound by Jim Collins, this was in Boneyard Creek Crossing. One of the pictures you can see actually shows Ice Pops, the sculpture that we installed in the background. But Jim Collins picked that up just a couple of weeks ago and took that towards its next destination. Thank you to Public Works, who came out and assisted with the deinstallation of that piece. I also want to mention that a new lease is also up. Public Art League has actually purchased this sculpture and plans to put it outside of Walnut Street Tea Company in Champaign. Fun fact, for the time being, it's sticking around in Urbana. You might have still seen it. During the deinstallation process, we realized we needed a stronger crane forklift because this is completely limestone. And so Urbana gets to benefit from it being delayed and being with us a little bit longer till it ventures over to our sister city, Champaign, to enjoy it for a while. But that, too, was a recent purchase by the Public Art League. And I wanted to mention, I didn't bring it with me today, but we also did receive kind of a placard from the Public Art League at the unveiling that I attended a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was last week. The weeks are melting together. But this was in recognition of our sponsorship for the particularly Races, and for the renewal of Three Red Houses, which we also renewed this cycle. And, of course, all the work that we put around Ice Pops, though it was sponsored by Mike Hosier's group. Lastly, I want to mention that we continue our planning around a downtown event series, and we'll have some more updates soon. We're currently working on kind of coming up with a budget and some bare bones as partners continue to work together, and we're excited for that to be on the horizon. We're scheduling this from May to August in the summer as a fourth Saturday downtown special event that would take place on Main Street. So I will have some more updates about that as things unfold, but that's in the works and we're excited that direction. Social media marketing report. We've seen some slight increases in Facebook and Instagram, and Twitter remains the same. We're always looking for volunteers in our programs, and also attendance and enthusiasm and advocacy from everyone listening, and of course from our commissioners. So if you would like to be involved in any of the programs that have been mentioned or have ideas for new programs you'd like to share, please know that my door is open and my email is there, and I look forward to connecting. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I just want to say that I plead incompetence rather than neglect in not getting to the reception for Races, because my wife and I went at what we thought was the right time, and we saw it still on the trailer. So we thought, oh my goodness, I guess we're early. I guess it hasn't been taken off the trailer. And we went off to run some sort of errand downtown, and we came back, and it was just all gone. There was nothing there. And so we didn't, I guess we should have gone inside, but it didn't occur to us to do that. So we were with you in spirit.
Yes, we were in there, but I could understand how that would send a mixed signal. Mm-hmm.
Well, it
Go
was
ahead,
also
Barb.
interesting because I was walking into the building, and there were police swarming around the building. And there had been some sort of altercation with someone, it had nothing to do with our reception, but I was like, I don't know whether I should go in or not. I don't know whether they caught the person or not, but there was somebody they were chasing. So it was a memorable day.
Well, I think Bobby Joe was a real good sport about it. He ended up still being interviewed, and then thanks to Urbana Public Television, they were able to kind of put together footage from both the installation that occurred a week later, I think a week and a half after Thanksgiving, and the artist talk that he gave that day, and that aired also on UPTV. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I was just going to say, I think there's a UPTV Facebook page now, too, because Jason asked me to like it the other day, so we can all go on and like the Urbana Public TV channel.
Yeah, and all of those things, we really try to encourage a lot of about traffic to our social media sites. So if you're listening or you're someone who sits on our commission, consider also when you feel good about it, share the things that we're sharing if it feels like something you're willing to do, and help get the word out about the events that we have going on or the news that we have. We have some other things that have taken place recently I didn't really include in this report, such as the Attached Student Art Show, which I promoted a lot on our social media, and that was a high school art show connecting Central, Centennial, and Urbana High in a joint art show that took place at the Civic Center, and with support of the Public Arts Program, they were able to use the Civic Center and borrow our walls that we use for the Art Expo to
Great.
display student artwork. And we're always looking for ways to partner with other organizations.
Okay, well, thanks, Rachel. Okay, next we're going to have a grant presentation from Emily Knox of Makerspace Urbana about the Heartland Maker Fest.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Knox. I am a key member of Makerspace Urbana, and I'm here to give our presentation on Heartland Maker Fest, which was held on October 13th, 2018. We have been supported by the Urbana Public Arts Commission since we started as a mini maker fair 7 years ago, and we are now the Heartland Maker Fest. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how it went this year. So, as I mentioned, we were held on October 13th, 2018, from 9 to 2. We had 1,600 attendees. That's always an estimate because we only have counters at 2 doors in Lincoln Square Mall. We had 30 makers from across Central Illinois and 15 volunteers. This was primarily the work of a committee of 4. Here's a list of the different makers that we had. We had both returning and new people. We actually had people who come back from, say they were makers 3 years previously and they decided to come back. It was a nice mix of people that were both commercial, and people who just do things in their basement. So we always love having lots of different people. So you'll notice that the Idea Store is on there. Mm-hmm. We were really hoping that the Idea Store would be open October 13th so we could do the grand opening. They opened 2 weeks later, but we are very excited that they will be there when we hold our next Maker Fest. And they were able to advertise that they will be in the space because they had their own table. So what the grant does for us is it allows us to have the event for free. It pays for all of the space rental at Lincoln Square Mall. We get a discount for being a 501c3. We're part of the Independent Media Center. And this is really important to us. A lot of maker fairs charge for people to attend, and it's very important to us that our event be free. We've actually lowered the cost, I should tell you, of the event overall. We stopped worrying so much about getting exciting food, and we just get pizza for lunch, and we get Einstein Brothers bagels for breakfast, and we only get water for people to drink. And our main cost, other than the space rental, is now that we have a billboard. And so a lot of people actually notice those billboards. We get them from, I believe, Adams. And those are wherever they choose, since it's a 501c3. But they really have heightened the visibility of the fest. These are our sponsors overall. Makerspace Urbana is one of the big sponsors, the Urbana Public Arts Program. This year we had a new sponsor, the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning helped out this year as well. And our in-kind sponsors are always Weiskamp and Dixon. Acorn Active Media is not actually very active anymore, but they always support us for the Maker Fest, and we really appreciate that. So here are just some pictures of the fest and some of the various things that happened. This was a really great, I think it's a Minecraft, maybe a Fortnite, something like that, costume that someone put together in their home. And this is their kid, and they were walking around all day wearing this costume. These are game emulator, or I think these are coding with games is what this one is. So you can see Bite the Chili Productions. This is basically what it works is like as lights go across this particular pattern, they talk to each other. So as you move the lights move across. This is Pat Factory. Pat is actually a member of Makerspace Urbana. This is one of several 3D printers that's always there. I think this one was building a castle. This is Frankenbikes. They were one of the people who had been there before and came back. We hope to have more pictures posted to our Facebook page. And also we can also post them to Twitter and Instagram. So hopefully those will come up. We've already booked Lincoln Square Mall for October 5th, 2019, and we will be applying for a grant again. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have questions or comments? Go ahead.
I'll just say I attended again this year, and I found it to be just, as usual, such a robust and wonderful event. And the effort is obvious from everyone who attends. I know my nephew got quite a kick out of it as well. So thank you, and terrific job.
Sure. We're happy to do it.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, next we're going to have a grant presentation from Lori Fuller, who did acrylic painting for artists with Alzheimer's.
My name is Lori, and I was a recipient of an art grant to work with Alzheimer's patients in Urbana. I was interested in working with Alzheimer's patients because I had two very close friends that I work with on campus who had family members who passed away from Alzheimer's. One, her husband had passed away about 3 years ago, and then, one of my other friends had her dad pass away. And so in my conversations with them, they're very sad conversations. One that, talked about isolation and quietness and being very, not very social. So I thought that art would be a great project to work with Alzheimer's patients. And so there's a facility in Urbana that I was interested in working with over at Amber Glen. So I contacted Diane Rock and met with her to see if she would be interested in me teaching painting lessons to the Alzheimer's patients over there. In my mind, I've had some teaching experience before. I taught adults, I taught kids, I taught preschool kids. I have absolutely loved every moment of it. I did not have a whole lot of experience working with Alzheimer's patients. So my first, inclination when I was trying to plan the event was working on 16 by 20 canvases and, having an hour and a half or 2 hour painting lessons. And Diane quickly told me that they're probably going to be about 45 minutes long, and your canvas needs to be closer to 8 by 10. And so she was able to give me a very helpful tips to help me through the process. My first lesson, I decided to, and then we were going to do this in 4 Saturdays in October. So my first lesson, I wanted to pick something that was seasonal. So October lent itself well to fall. I like to pick a theme that maybe led itself very well to social activities, some social stories that maybe they wanted to tell. My very first lesson, I chose a pumpkin, a very large pumpkin, so it was a very bright orange color with a blue background. It was a very simple drawing, but I learned a lot through that first lesson because they struggled a lot with it. Their hands shook a lot. They had very low confidence, and so from that lesson, I went to move on to the next Saturday of working with flowers, so large flowers. So the next 2 Saturdays, we worked with very large flowers, flower drawings. One of the ladies that's in the picture here was 102 years old, and it was all the lessons I felt were successful. I think my first lesson I was more intent on the painting exercise, and then after that I learned very quickly that that's not why we're here. We're here to use art as a social medium. And to learn more about ourselves, to gain confidence, and to have some fun in the meantime. So our lessons, I did have an assistant with me for every Saturday. All of the groups were about 5 to 6 people. There was one Saturday we had quite a few more. And it was in the Amber Glen area, so we had access to a sink, we had access to a lot of cleanup supplies, and we did have some helper volunteers that do the process. So the first lesson we did a pumpkin, and I did hear some stories about how they grew pumpkins when they were living on a farm, or had pumpkins, they liked pumpkin pie. So there was some conversations that came out of that. The second and third, when we started doing the flowers, were also very lively conversations. The very last lesson, I know that they had struggled for the first lesson and the second lesson on how to fill up that white space. So my last lesson, I decided to do a fall tree. So I had painted the background with a sky-like color, and then let them explore and draw the trunk with the paint, and then dab on the leaves with the colors. So not all of them, painted with us. Some of them just decided to paint on their own, which was fine. So we had some very creative canvases that came from the lessons. This slide right here are the final pieces that we did with the fall trees. There's a lot of variety, which I think was very fun and very interesting. Just went too fast there. This was one of the images that I selected to advertise for the reception. At the reception, we had all of the canvases out available for viewing. So you can see in that very first slide over here that there are the sunflowers and some of the larger flowers and the fall tree that we had worked on. Here's some more of the images. We actually pushed them up a little bit further so the audience could see them. A couple more examples. This one in the middle right there is very interesting because we were starting to paint pumpkins, and then she started talking about fireworks, and so she painted fireworks on her canvas, which I thought was very lovely. So some more examples. We had one lady that came to all of our painting lessons, and if you look at all the canvases, you can kind of pick out her style because she comes in with a lot of straight and angular lines, and so the very last one she did was the one on the end with the tree. She had a lot of fun and a lot of stories that came from that. Here's a close-up of some of the flowers that we did, and again, there's a canvas with the final one that we had done with the tree. Let's see, a couple more pictures. So I would really like to thank the Urbana Public Arts Commission for providing, grant funds for this project. I have learned a lot. It was a great and wonderful experience. Diane has asked us to come back again next year to provide art instruction to the artist over there. I'd also like to thank the Urbana Arts Program, and Rachel, you were a wonderful support throughout the whole thing. I really appreciate everything that the grant made possible, and it was a very rewarding experience.
Great, very good. Yeah, I did visit at the reception, and it was really nice to see the work that they had done, and I'm sure you had fun just having them talk.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
they actually, came later on to, pick up their artworks, and I know that during that first lesson, we had one of the participants that didn't want to leave their canvas to dry, and she very, quickly picked it up and put it in her room to hang it up, so that really made me feel really well. So I know that these are, all of the canvases are hanging up and in their in their rooms over at Amber Glen, so they can, remember about that event and that experience. It's great.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you're going to be going to Amber Glen again. Have you thought of going to other facilities in town?
Absolutely. I'm interested in writing for another art grant and working with senior citizens, not only at Amber Glen, because I would like to come back there too, but I'm expanding the audience, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Eric.
this is wonderful, but I just have two questions about context. Number one, how unusual or how common or how unique is this around the country? How many programs like this exist in centers like that?
Oh, at Amber Glen specifically?
Not at
or-
Amber Glen,
Oh,
but
that-
anywhere.
That would be a great thing to research, really. And I know that they do have a lot of activities over at Amber Glen for the patients over there, but I'm not sure of very many art. And so from my conversations with Diane Rock, that was the first time that they had painting lessons over there. I would say that I was, like the very first one, they were a little bit hesitant because it was something new to them, but I think once we had familiar faces, like the volunteers or some of the workers that came there to make them feel a lot easier, it was very much more successful.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as art with people with Alzheimer's, isn't there something that the Cranor Center for Performing Arts does? Do they do dance?
That's
Yeah, but
dance
it's
for
not for
people with
Alzheimer's,
Parkinson's.
it's for Parkinson's.
Parkinson's, yeah.
At the Children's Museum in Madison, Wisconsin, one of their former staff members initiated programs for people with Alzheimer's there. I think that my estimate just would be that it's increasingly common, I guess, as a really large demographic group starts to age.
Yeah, Eric, my personal experience just going to these places is I don't think they usually do something as elaborate as trying to paint. The best you might do would be maybe crafts, but not actually trying to paint. So,
The other thing I'm moved to wonder, and I guess I'm not asking you in particular, but this is just a question that arose in my mind, is I wonder whether painting or other kinds of art is something that might be promising in slowing the progression of dementia or cognitive impairment.
I noticed that when I was teaching the painting lessons that they were, they were very shaky. So I don't think pencil would lend itself well, but I think maybe something like clay They weren't, they were all very interested. They didn't mind getting their hands dirty, which was fine. And I think that actually getting in and maybe working with something like a medium, like a soft clay, would be something great for the Alzheimer's patients.
Wow, there should be somebody on the psychology faculty doing research in aging who should think about this if they're not already.
I think there's some going on in Baltimore in that area.
I think that there's the reason that that sprang readily to mind for me is because in 2015 I had a classmate who ended up having to leave the program to take care of his parents. And I remember him saying, this was at University of Wisconsin-Madison, I remember him saying that there was a study there as far as like factors that impact Alzheimer's. I had a really long conversation with him about it. I don't remember all of it, but probably checking to see what's going on at as far as the research at UW-Madison might turn something up.
Could I ask one more question? Were you surprised at the quality of the work that they did, or did you expect that? Because I was struck by it.
I thought they did a wonderful job, especially in like the time frame of 45 minutes. I was quite surprised. I was more surprised at the stories that they told. They had one gentleman that said he used to play for the Boston Red Sox, and so he was telling stories about baseball while he was painting a flower. So it was really nice. I mean, the conversations that my expectation was just a lot of the conversations based on the subject matter, but they went way beyond that. So it was just, it was just a great experience. It was great.
It just sounds terrific. I say this as an octogenarian.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I just want to acknowledge a couple of things. First off, Lori, I know you both as a grantee, but also you have done a tremendous amount of volunteering in Urbana in the last year, too, to teach painting to people and populations that don't always get those lessons. And I want to just commend you for that, because even outside of the grant, I've really been witness to you doing a lot to share that work and see what it can elicit. One of the things that was notable to me was the Paint Your Own Masterpiece that you did at the Urbana Free Library voluntarily, and that's just fantastic to be able to encourage people of all ages to think about painting as for them. To your point, Eric, I just wanted to add that, in the realm of not just art therapy, but expressive arts, there's been a long history of research, and most recently, a very notable documentary called Alive Inside that focused on music and Alzheimer's. And I could see that being another spot of maybe some interest for the project of thinking through what even incorporating music during painting time could do in an activity like that. I would love to see what other kind of memories get elicited. So that's very exciting.
I would be very interested in pursuing that too. I think that'd be fun.
Eric, did you have more to say? Or?
Yeah, I'm also always thinking about academic politics. Wouldn't it be great if somehow there was an art therapy faculty line created at the university? In either, I don't know, one of the fine arts departments or in psychology department.
Yeah, some schools do have a music therapy program, but not one here.
Go ahead.
Actually, at Edgewood College in Madison, Wisconsin, there is an art therapy program. I know it's definitely bachelor's level. I'm not sure if there's a graduate level or not.
Well, thanks very much, Lori. We really appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Rachel's going to talk to us now about the proposed changes to the Urbana Arts Grant Program.
just want to make a quick note. There is another committee meeting in here at 6 p.m., so just for us to stay mindful of time as we enter into this discussion. So I'm presenting a sort of a fresh draft of planning for the arts grants. Excuse me. And what you have in front of you is a summary that has been updated to reflect some of the feedback from the last meeting, as well as, and I wanted to, if you flip it over to the back, giving more of a process. So that was one of the questions that became a point of discussion for us at last meeting, and I wanted to follow up and make sure that we have a clear delineation of what a process could look like, and so this is for us to discuss tonight. So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, the way that the grant program as proposed as to change is not a huge change right now. We're keeping obviously the same mission of the grant program, and the same breadth of things will be funded as we've had in terms of diversity of different arts mediums. What we are changing is really the names of categories and slightly what the restrictions of those categories would be. So what we have now is a Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 category, and then Arts in the Schools remains, and then an introduction of a Poet Laureate program. So Tier 1 is really designed for individual or small-scale projects, or simply projects that aren't asking for a lot of funding, right? So these are between $500 and $1,500 is the ask. Tier 2 is for mid-sized events, and it requires a 50% match. And these range from $1,500 to $4,500. And really think of these as probably incorporating potentially some of the smaller scale, even small festivals or festivals that don't have a huge budget would probably fall more into the Tier 2 category from our previous categories. It benefits us in a way to care less about who's applying and more about the output, what is being asked for, and what is and what they're able to put in as a match and that sort of thing. Tier 3 would be large-scale special events. That this can include things like festivals, but the most important point being that it would require a 70% match. So we would fund up to 30% of their total budget for the event, and that Tier 2, as it's described here in your table, would allow for some in-kind to count towards that match, and Tier 3 would not allow in-kind to count towards that match, so that match has to be financial. The Poet Laureate program would be a flat $2,000 award. It is awarded to one Urbana applicant per year. That's Urbana resident applicant. And that person would then work with the Urbana Public Arts Program to host a couple of events per year, and to also be they'd be invited to different opportunities for the Poet Laureate to share work. Would be featured on the website, would have a lot of support in terms of being highlighted as our city's Poet Laureate for that year.
Can I ask one question about the categories here?
Yes.
I'd just like to know why Tier 2 only goes up to $4,500 and then Tier 3 starts at $5,000.
I had the same question.
Yeah, I mean, we could have done $4,999, and I had that there for a minute, and then it just sort of, I mean, I can still do that, but just to have a cleaner, look.
Seems weird. You know, it's just like, why did they arbitrarily decide on that? You know?
Yeah, well, $500 too is a somewhat arbitrary amount of money and a dollar difference too. So we were just sort of thinking about what would make for kind of a cleaner category. But if it's the desire to have it go up to $4,999, I'm happy to do that. And 99 cents, right?
Well,
No, it's just that if the question came up to us, probably other people will also wonder. So. Yeah.
We're considering updating our jury instructions this year, and one area in which it kind of ceases to be a very useful use of that group's time when they're getting down into dividing in the sub, 500 intervals, and we want to encourage kind of allotments, minimum allotments in the future. Okay. So we're not, really parsing down and doing a lot of math at those meetings. It's more about how the jury sees the projects.
If I could suggest wording, I would say greater than 1,500 but less than 5,000?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's really your intention, and it would be absolutely clear.
For Tier 2.
For Tier 2, greater
Yeah.
than 1,500 and less than 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
I do see your point about having it the way it is right now, because applying for a Tier 2 grant at $4,999.99 doesn't quite feel like it meets the spirit, you know?
Mm.
So, and for some
Yeah.
context, because the same question could be raised about the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2. And I think what we'll need to do, and what I will be doing, is really emphasizing the other things that people will consider when selecting which category, which are the eligibility for that category. And it has much to do with operating budget, infrastructure, and support for putting on an event like that. Now, it's
Right.
not just an organization's budget, so, but it does require, for instance, Tier 3 would ask for it to be financial. But let's say, for example, the applicant has an Illinois Arts Council grant, and they're asking for an additional amount of money for one performance in a concert series that's otherwise funded up to that performance or something. They can include, this is the demonstrated confirmed amount that we have from another place, as part of their budget, of course, as long as it's monies and not in-kind volunteer hours or something like that. And that's specifically for Tier 3, which will have the highest restriction.
Okay.
I had a question about the Poet Laureate. Was that a request? That this is sort of the first, through the revisions, this is the first I've heard about it being possible, I guess. And I'm curious how it would be, because you said it would need to be an Urbana resident, right?
Well, that's for us to decide and discuss.
Right.
But the Poet Laureate program came simply in response to, during a lot of the work we've been doing around arts and culture, noticing lots of cities have a Poet Laureate program and thinking it would be a great thing to add in terms of grant category. We haven't funded to date very many poets, and I don't know that they always see an opportunity. But this is something that very many cities have,
Right.
and might be a great thing for us to add. Other discussion?
Would we like to specifically commission the Poet Laureate to write poems about Urbana? I mean, that because that is part of Poet Laureate programs in other places.
I guess I would say, I think that's definitely a possibility, but I don't think necessarily the goal.
Mhm.
So as it's been written here, and I think that as far as the Poet Laureate's activities, that can be a very much to be determined, and probably will be determined based on the interests of the person selected. So we don't want to give them too many restrictions. Certainly, if they come in and do something like host an open scene, or if the ask is for them to partake in some of our programs, which I think it ought to be, they can craft what that looks like and decide if that has a theme, and if it has an Urbana theme, sure. A lot of cities have the Poet Laureate also, come in, perhaps read a piece that would have significance or meaning during an important moment for the city in some way, and I could see that giving rise to somebody deciding to write a piece specifically for that moment, which could include writing for the city or for something like that. But the poet's usually selected based on their work to date and by a jury of creative writers and different folks in the community. And then I think that's really for the commission and the program to decide, how would it be the best use of their time, and how can they be the advocate for that art form, and also to be highlighted as a fixture at the city.
If people haven't seen it, I think there's this wonderful movie about a poet's relationship to a city called Paterson. If people have not seen that film, it's fantastic. Have you seen it? No? It's, well, it's about a bus driver named Patterson who drives a bus in Paterson, but it's really about William Carlos Williams, who was from Paterson.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities with this, but I'm interested in your thoughts and your feedback on the proposal.
Perhaps we could encourage that person to create events around poetry in Urbana, of course.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's sort of what I envision, and I think that a lot of cities have positioned that person to do. And of course, tethering it to existing programming where possible.
We're not saying, though, that the person selected has to be from Urbana, are we?
And I think that's for us to decide, you know, whether it has to be an Urbana resident or not.
I mean, I'd like it to be local, I think, but I don't know that it necessarily has to be specific to Urbana, as long as the
Like a resident of
activities are...
Champaign County, for instance.
Yeah.
I would be more interested in the person creating works about Urbana than being from Urbana.
Other thoughts?
I had another thought, but it's about the next category when we get to it.
Well, I would love to get input on this idea of whether it's restricted to Urbana residents, Champaign County residents, or I don't know if, Eric, you're suggesting that could be from anywhere across the country. The reason why, for instance, in the past we've restricted things like Artists of the Corridor is to highlight the artists that live and work here in our city of Urbana, and to give our residents a unique opportunity. We have since talked about expanding that even a little bit, and one of the things that, a framing that I could also see us using is something like priority is given to residents who, or people in Champaign, poets in Champaign County that have a connection to Urbana, and with perhaps priority given to Urbana residents that apply. Or that Urbana residency will be taken into consideration. I mean, some of these kinds of things that leave it open, but might help create a priority for Urbana poets.
I like that suggestion.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Because as soon as you said, like, from someplace else, I thought, well, that could be an interesting way to bring up, like, what makes Urbana interesting to a poet or someone who's going to look at it from that perspective, or, you know, that could really boost morale or production or however you want to word it here, too. But we don't only want to have outside people, too.
Right, because there's such a value in our work being to also promote local artists.
I think if you go ahead. If you cast like a really wide net, would there be like residency considerations too? They had to come from far away to do events like you were saying.
Or at least be in residence for a certain period of time, every time they're here.
Personally, I'm inclined to prioritize local poets in
Yeah.
some way, and
I am
perhaps
too.
allowing that to grow, you know, and see where it grows from here. Kind of like maybe even we've done with Artists of the Corridor, really tried to kind of prioritize local folks, but then, you know, maybe opened it up eventually to people outside.
Well, especially since this is the first time we're doing this, so, yeah.
Do we have fiscal responsibility considerations because we're using Urbana tax dollars? We assume that the money would be spent in Urbana or would
The
help
activities would
return
have
to
to
the
take place
community?
in Urbana.
Right.
So, you know, we wouldn't, you know, award somebody to do work in Champaign or beyond. So it has to benefit Urbana residents, but this absolutely would benefit Urbana residents.
Sure,
Mhm.
I would think so. Go ahead.
Just for clarification, I'm hearing a potential consensus around the idea that the applicant be a resident of Champaign County at the time of application. Is anyone opposed to that? Because I'm hearing we don't want to go more restricted and we don't want to go further out.
Well, it seems to me it'd be
Wow.
kind of difficult for somebody from outside to come here and understand Champaign-Urbana.
I mean, that's something that could potentially be a great art grant application, to bring in an outside poet,
Right,
have them
yeah, I
create
wouldn't be
works
opposed
about
to that,
Urbana. But as far
yeah.
as the Poet Laureate program, most of them highlight local poets in the area
Mm-hmm.
and are designed to be, because we're, a $2,000 award is not sufficient for a living and
Right.
residency and all of that as well, and travel, that it be somebody who resides here and then is highlighted for their work in the community.
Are they then eligible for any of these other awards?
That's a good question. That's up for us to
Mm.
determine, I think.
Because what you just said was, so I'm the poet laureate for the year, but 2,000 doesn't provide for all the things you just mentioned, I don't know, if they would want to.
Well, that's a question that's come up around all the grant categories, like can somebody receive multiple grants in different categories? Because this is, in a way, its own grant category, but then if somebody's working on a group project and they're just one of the number of people that are
Right.
applying, or they're applying on behalf of an organization, we've obviously seen that happen before.
I mean, these
Like-
grants were never meant to be something that would sustain someone's livelihood. I mean,
Yes.
there's just not that much money.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So I assume that there would be like a description of the qualifications that
Yes.
that we would pass off on, so. I guess
For the
you-
poet.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
the poet. So you have kind of, please, all of my thoughts on this are kind of tentative. I can be persuaded a
I
couple of
guess it
different
would be the
ways.
question, how do we actually decide if we have multiple people applying? How do we decide who?
Well,
what's
it would
gonna be the
it would be a
process?
jury, just like we do with the other
Okay.
grants, and this would be a specific jury. I think because of the shift, that it makes the most sense to have these each be different juries.
Yeah.
We've kind of combined two categories in the past, and Arts in the Schools has been on a separate timeline. This proposal brings them all in one, but I do think we'd still have our different juries, and they'd probably just correspond with the categories. To me, that makes the most sense.
Okay.
And a poet laureate jury would be intentionally designed with creative writers and people who can evaluate
Right.
prose or poetry that they receive, as well as the person's CV or resume and track record of doing events and things like that.
Did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just kind of excited by that because we're usually very grab bag in terms of what the jury's evaluating. To actually assemble a jury that's for a real specific purpose, I think that'll be interesting. It'll lead to interesting outcomes.
I'm really glad that there will be a poet laureate.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I have no question about that.
I think what I'm excited about, and of course this comes in the context of, and I should have mentioned it sooner, but last night's city council meeting, hopefully you also were attentive to that, or maybe you watched it, or maybe you heard, but the city council also made an initial vote to approve the proposal to become an Arts and Culture Commission. Once things like, and it has to go to another city council meeting before it's confirmed in that sense, but we have in many ways delayed our visioning process for this commission because we had this change coming down the pipe. When that change is confirmed, I'm excited to have a visioning process where we can really talk about, all of the things that we have been over this arts and culture conversation, which include things like how do we work to diversify the arts forms that we mentioned in our mission that we care deeply about. How do we diversify the people that are connected to our arts program and the segments of the community that may be underrepresented in our arts program. I know that Urbana to date has not really had a poetry program as another art form that perhaps doesn't have as much attention given to it, and it with a number of things. So I think we can continue that visioning and think about how do we programmatically include these different and project the diversity in the arts that we see and ascribe to our program.
There's a lot of activity in the city of Champaign with poetry groups and readings
And
and
Urbana.
activities at Cranard and the Jane Addams Bookstore. I know I've been to some of those events.
Well, and Urbana has historic, things like the Red Herring Writers Group that has been meeting
Right.
for decades.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have poets at the Post, we've got Soul on Sunday, we have, CU Poetry Group meets in Urbana, we have, the Open Scene Open Mic now, so many different, events and things going on that it's really a growing scene, I see. So I'm excited in general to think about all the different art forms that we can elevate through our programs.
Well, how many Champaign-Urbana poets were read at Pygmalion? It was about 30 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was around 30,
Yeah.
possibly more. 2 whole nights from 5 to midnight.
Yeah.
Wow. Perhaps with all those different groups, they might come together and do something really spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
And that was organized by Jim O'Brien, who received this year's Volunteer ACE Award from 40 North, and was one of the core organizers of CU Poetry Group, and was also a featured host on Open Scene Open Mic. So, we have kind of a circuit of poets, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of applications for
Yes.
something like this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think we're stocked with applicants for the next 30 years or so.
For all the grants, it's true.
Well, for all the grants, but I was thinking specifically of Poet Laureate.
Yeah, and one other change that I am proposing a bit to the arts in the school is simply that in the past we had this on a different timeline, and I have spoken to some teachers too to kind of ask for some weighing in on this idea. Because teachers, are very, very busy, number one. But one thing I would like to even potentially consider is allowing the arts in the school cycle to have this month-long, essentially month-and-a-half-long cushion, where their cycle could actually potentially go up to June, allowing it to go with the school year. So if they apply and are awarded on this timeline of April 1st, that it could function for some summer school program, but it could also function for fall or all of spring of the following year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it would just allow them a little bit of a leniency on the April to April 1st deadline, and allow that to go with the school.
Yeah. There are definitely mechanisms that the finance department can assist you with to to do funding periods that are not completely aligned with the fiscal year.
Well, and ours are never aligned with the fiscal year to begin with.
Yeah.
Ours are a little wild. They keep me on my toes.
Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
yeah. So this is definitely possible, and
Yeah.
sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
And, we've had ours be kind of arts in the schools, leading into the school year. Well, that's a really busy time for teachers anyway. So I know that we've done that with the intention of giving them almost a full year's time. This effectively does the same thing. It gives them winter break and things to think about it, and early spring semester to possibly submit an application. I think we're going to run into the same trouble with busy people as we will anywhere, where the deadlines are concerned. Arts in the schools has often been a 2-step process where they apply and then it goes to jury and then they have to submit letters of support from the school. In my experience, which of course has only been 1 year, but 1 year on the jury, previous to working as the arts coordinator, I didn't really see exactly the need to separate those things out. So just as we ask for letters of support for grant applications in every category, I think we can ask for letters of support from the participating teacher or school if the application's not coming from a teacher and is coming from an artist.
Absolutely.
So that's just to kind of simplify things, get all the application materials on a similar cycle and all at once.
I just want to remind the commission that because another body is going to be meeting in
Yes.
here, we need to be wrapped up within 15 to 20 minutes at the most.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know how much more, maybe, Rachel, you could complete your presentation.
Just want
and
to
then
talk about this.
Yeah.
Can I just confirm some of the things
Yeah.
you've said? Because I remember years ago, we met with all teachers in the Yankee Ridge School Library, and we asked them the same questions. And in general, at the beginning of the school year, they're too crazed with everything getting organized and settled down. And by the middle of the spring, they're so worried about testing and things that they can't focus on some of these programs. So, and then, of course, with the year-round schools now, it has changed. I've been coordinating programs in the schools through music for many, many years, and I've noticed that we've had to increase our programming for the summer for schools. We've had many more requests in the last couple of years because of the year-round school programming.
Yeah.
And the private schools, especially, most of they're asking for programs in the summer because don't have enough things to do for their children.
Well, and I speak as a resident procrastinator at times, but I can say that our grant applications have not actually changed in the past few years in terms of what they ask for, and I'm not going to change it up too much in terms of what we're asking for, and the documents that they provide, the information they provide. So, if somebody was interested in getting that application ready well in advance, they could. That those guidelines and things are already on our website. But one thing that I think we'll do as we do visioning is be thinking about, how might our visioning impact our programs, including the grants, including like if we are an arts and culture commission, do we want to offer culture grants? And that will be a question that we can explore further as we do visioning together. I just put up your program goals just so you can see what we share in our grants as the goals of the grant program. I don't foresee it changing. It really already does reflect a commitment to partnerships, collaboration, representing the community's diversity, encouraging emerging artists and art forms. So, you'll see that continue in this proposal. And then I just broke down the funding guidelines again that you have in front of you as far as the match and whether in-kind is allowed, minimum and maximums of the awards. And then this is what I want to draw your attention to. This is on the back of your sheet. So we talked about process, and I want to just go through this quickly. Can I do a time check? I don't have a...
It's 5:30.
Okay, so just quickly, and I'm just going to give you dates because I have an idea of what these dates ought to be for this cycle. So the grant period opens. I would like this to be by the end of this week if we can open this grant period. And then we can start accepting applications. They'll be posted and shared. Grant workshops are scheduled. So I actually have grant workshops scheduled in the coming weeks and beginning with next week at the Urbana Free Library, at the School of Art and Design, at the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center, at Parkland Garrett's Gallery, at Salt and Light in Urbana, and at the Urbana Neighborhood Connections Center. So those are the ones that are scheduled, but I've also been in communication with the fine arts teachers at Urbana School District who potentially come and meet in a meeting that would be open to all teachers who are interested in specifically focusing on arts in the schools, but I'll mention all the arts grants there as well. Grant application would be due next, and I'm suggesting that we keep with what we've had historically, which would make it February 15th. This is a Friday by 5. And then what would happen is that I would accept all those applications at that time. I would do a quick review for eligibility and completeness. Being generous, I would contact anyone that has an incomplete to give them an opportunity to send some other materials if they need to. If they don't respond, it goes into a no pile. You won't even see those applications because they are incomplete. Then what I would do is I would organize the juries. They'd already be organized at this time, but I would start organizing the dates of the meetings and getting all those underway for tiers 1, 2, Arts in the Schools, and Poet Laureate. So there's 4 jury meetings. And then tier 3 would be sent to you directly, and we can determine the easiest way to share them with you. Then commissioners would also receive an awards and scoring worksheet at that time. You can submit questions to me. This is outside of our meeting. You can just submit questions to me as a staff member, and we'll bring those questions up publicly as well. And then applicants would be invited to a special meeting. I would love to suggest this takes place on February 26th. It's also a Tuesday, but it's not our typical meeting time. Of course, we can talk other dates if that doesn't work, but I'm thinking it would be valuable to keep it on a Tuesday at 4:30, knowing that you can meet every at least second Tuesday of the month at that time. I'm hopeful that's a time that typically works. And you would hear then all of the Tier 3 presenters in person making their proposal for the program, and they could get to elaborate a little bit, answer any questions. Then we would submit scoring sheets at the end of that meeting, and I would compile all that information into a recommendation, and as well as a recommendation of the funding. And then I would give that back to you, and at the next meeting, we would have a discussion and take it to a vote at the next commission meeting. And that would be essentially the process. Of course, after that, applicants in all categories would be notified, and they'd be invited to their sneak peek public event and celebration for a April 1st start date. So it'll be a little bit of a marathon, and then April 1st they'll get to go. So I'm curious about looking over that proposal. Is there anything that you see that you would want more information about? Certainly scoring sheets, we can talk more in detail about at a next meeting. It's not something that I need to have ready to go to release these grant guidelines. And I can also, maybe as a jumping off point, next meeting I'll bring our jury scoring sheets that we typically use, and we can talk a little bit more about what process you'd like to use or if you'd like to keep with the same process.
Can I just clarify one question that I had about this Arts in the School program?
Yes.
Because the description says initiatives in local schools. Do we want to say, because someone might misinterpret that, aren't they supposed to be in Urbana schools?
Yes, so I gave very brief descriptions of
Right.
these, and they're more elaborate in our guidelines. They say Urbana School District
Okay,
116
good.
schools, all of, yeah. mhm.
Great, thank
And
you.
they actually are restricted to during the school day. They're not supposed to fund after-school activities because it's supposed to really support arts education during school time accessible to
And
everybody.
there becomes liability issues, too.
Yeah.
Generally, between 9 and 2 are good times, I've found, with schools, working with them all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. When are you scheduling the rest of the juries? What
Right,
timeline
so
is
that
it?
would be basically in between that February 15th time and probably as late as our special meeting on the 26th, kind of in between there.
Okay.
When do you think you would have the applicant packets to us to have time to like review before the special meeting?
Well, I don't want to overcommit on that because they're due on Friday at 5, and we always have stragglers, and we can decide to be really mean about it and be like, you didn't get in, or, you know. One thing that would be true is I would not be able to even look at them till Monday, and would probably need some time contacting, letting people know if they have an incomplete application. So ideally, at least like 3 or 4 days, if not a week after that, would be ideal. I know that your packet will go out. I'm trying to think of the dates. I don't have them in front of me, but how about I ask this question of you instead? So what, as commissioners, would you like to see in terms of in advance of that special meeting? Of course, at that special meeting, even if you came and you read nothing, you would get to hear their proposals, you'd get to read, you'd get to go home and read and think about it some more, and then submit scoring sheets to me. So you would have some time too.
Do we have some feel for approximately how many people might be involved in the,
Yeah, that's a good question.
are we talking 4? Are we talking 10? You know?
Historically, what
Yeah.
are the averages, would you say?
Well,
We
I
won't
think
hold
we've
you to
shifted
it,
our
but-
categories a bit. So we're going to see some of the people that may have applied as a festival grant really not be able to apply in Tier 3 and be more ideal for Tier 2. And that's just on the nature of what they're putting together and what monies they have to put towards it as well. So I don't think we'll see like all of our festival applicants plus all of the special events applicants that we've seen
Right.
in the past. But did you want to speak to that?
I'd estimate 4 to 6 applications.
Okay.
Oh, that's okay. That's manageable.
And we will enforce a time limit too. Remember
Yeah,
that
please.
the
Yeah, to be
practice
fair.
of how special events agreements have been approved in the past. I've managed, Libby's managed. That's Libby Horwitz on economic development staff in the audience. And so we have working relationships with those who'd received funding through that other model, and we'll be kind of adapting that into the arts grant. So they'll be providing us that information, similar information, but in a new format. They'll be expected to give a brief presentation and make good use of the commission's time, and we'll enforce that in the process. Also, because it's a special, or we want this to be the standalone meeting because it wouldn't technically even be necessary if we had problems with quorum or whatever. If commission members weren't able to make that, it's still going to be recorded. You can submit questions in advance. It'll be a part of the public record too, leading up to your decision. And so it's a flexible way to allow the commission to have more information.
And the quorum would, of course, be necessary on the day that you vote, which would be the
Right.
next commission meeting. Mhm.
For sure.
So I think you asked us what we thought would be a reasonable time for us to
Right.
receive them. And it sounds to me like a week after the due date. Is that manageable for you? So if they're due on Friday the 15th, that would be Friday the 22nd?
And that would give
Yeah,
us
but that only gives you 4 days.
4 days to review it.
So if you want a little bit sooner, I can do my best to do it within by middle of the week or so. But, this also is very dependent on other things not coming up for our program, and you know, but I will do my best to carve out time and get that to you as soon as possible.
Well, that's my individual response. I would not feel, I would feel it would be okay by that Friday. If others want it earlier, then probably you ought to do that.
Yes, go ahead.
If the cycle starts on the 1st, or the 1st of April, right?
Mhm.
Is there a significance to the 26th?
No,
If you-
it could
you
be
make
the first Tuesday of March, for
Yeah.
instance. It's really that it has to happen before our commission meeting, and then I was trying to give you guys a time to actually think a little bit more, maybe seek more information, have
Yeah.
more of that time to write and read,
Yeah.
you know, because you actually have that chunk of time before your commission meeting where you vote. All this to say, if you don't get to thoroughly read your application, every single one, before you see proposals, you can see proposals, take notes, read your applications again, even after that, before you're voting, you know?
It's also important to note that staff will require time because we'll receive your recommendations individually, and then we'll seek to try to compile them together and come up with a recommendation for the whole body based on your individual responses. So that little process will take some time on our part as
Right.
well.
Will our scoring and award sheets be made public too? Just curious.
That's,
So,
I'm actually going to look into that in terms of how much disclosure will occur. Council has gone through a similar process of scoring special service requests. Do you recall if those were individual scorings were made public or not?
So the individual scorings were not routinely made public. However, one year, and this, for a time, I was compiling all of this stuff, and one year we had a FOIA request. And so we did respond, we did send to the news media who requested all of those worksheets. I sent them, or I guess I gave them to Jim Simon, who forwarded them on. So my guess is that they would be FOIAble, but I think that's a question to ask Jim.
Yeah, but
But-
I'll consult with
Yeah.
the city attorney and get you clear guidance on that. But, again, the decision that you're making is at the public meeting. These are also, draft documents effectively, so we'll have that conversation with the city attorney to see how much of that will be disclosed. But we need some communication from the commission in advance in order to formulate
Right.
a recommendation that ideally the commission would see fit to adopt. If not, you can change it at the meeting.
Oh,
good.
I would also, I think, but it might be worthwhile to check with Jim, I think that it's probably not possible to have an executive session for the purpose of evaluating grant proposals, but I
That's correct.
don't know that that's true for sure.
No, that's definitely correct.
Okay.
This body has to deliberate this decision for awards in public session. And that's why we're contemplating this as a two-step process where you can individually arrive at your determinations, and at that, you're not engaging in a public discourse at that time, and we sort of save the public discourse till everyone's provided, information, the commission then has a wealth of information to consider, to discuss, and then ultimately to vote. You also would have the ability to defer your vote. You could postpone it. You would have many options in the process, and we would, of course, tell you what the consequences would be on the grant guidelines, but.
Go
So
ahead.
one other question then. We are a public commission. The juries, I think, maybe are or are not, if they're voting on dispersion of public funds. So can juries meet in a non-public way?
they have been able to, yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding
have
that
in the past.
they
That
have a
they're-
different
that's fine. Yeah, and-
function as a body, and the budgetary discretion is still being exercised by staff.
Okay.
Is there a restriction to where they meet? Or has there been in the past?
Juries?
Because
They've just
the only time
typically
I've
met in
met
the
has
city
always been in
building.
this building, so I was just curious if it took place anywhere else.
Not that I recall, or that I have notes on. I've always had those meetings here, and I think that's been true of other
Yeah,
public arts
I
coordinators.
believe that's true.
And I just wanted to point out that the process of individual scoring, uninfluenced by other people, and then having a dialogue is exactly how we run juries. It's just we don't
Right.
do it in a public setting.
Right.
So when people make these applications, are they all purely electronic now? Or are there any paper hard copies that
No,
are
they have
submitted?
not been all electronic. They've been largely paper. They can submit them electronically via email. But there's a lot of people that make use of the paper option because they don't have access to computers or, don't regularly have access to printers.
Because I would think that would help to save the staff in their processing time
Yeah.
if everyone had to operate from the same working application format.
Yeah, well, and, that's another thing that would likely fall on the staff to scan and organize. And that's the reason why I, know that I will need a little bit of time to get that together. So promising like the next day or something, it's just not going to be possible.
Yeah. Well, that's
And if
what-
it makes the most sense to move that timeline a little later, so for instance, to the first week of March, and that gives you enough time before your vote, but, to kind of think about it, that works for me just fine.
Well, I was just thinking about trying to save you that, and once they submit it, it's already in those formats, that everybody is being considered with the same materials. I mean, this town is rife with, you can go to the library and get help and have things scanned, even if you don't have a scanner or a printer, you can go to the library or ask a friend, I would think.
Yeah.
I want to point out it is 5:45.
Yeah.
We need to wrap up, I guess.
If possible, I would like more time on the front end rather than on the other side.
Okay.
To be prepared for the people coming in. I think that may
So
also
something like the
help.
first Tuesday of March seems more desirable. Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
Moving that special meeting
Yeah.
so I can give you more time because I can't give you more time in that 1 week, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Does that make sense then?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I was hoping that we could leave it to have enough space in between, because like you said, you're still going to have to compile everybody's choices, and that will, I think, take more time, but I think we can make better informed choices and reduce the amount of work you have to do if we have more time ahead.
Okay. Yeah, there's only 2 Tuesdays for us to work with, so it's
Right.
really one or the
Yeah.
other, unless
Right.
we want to have a special meeting on an off Tuesday.
Well, you have to be realistic about what you can get accomplished, even if you are Wonder Woman.
Well, let me compile dates and we'll talk, we'll doodle or we'll do whatever we need to
Yeah.
do. We'll yodel and we'll find a date.
do the doodle.
But I will follow up with all of you on that as far as scheduling that special meeting and coming up with a firmer timeline, including deadlines for when you submit your scoring as well. So my deadline to give you things and your deadline to give it
Right.
back to me.
Yeah.
And we'll get things underway.
Right. And, yeah, what the scoring cards will look like, when we'll get, all
Yeah.
that.
There's a lot to do yet.
Yep.
I'm not suspecting that they will delineate hugely from what we've done in the past. That's, my intention isn't to make grandiose changes, especially because some of our jury processes have functioned quite well over the last few years. But
Not all of us have seen those scorecards before.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any announcements they want to make before we adjourn? Okay. In that case, I move we adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
We're done. Thank you.